In 1916, in a village in Shandong province, a woman laid a piece of red cloth on the floor and told her 5-year-old niece to stand on it. She took a piece of chalk-like stone and carefully traced the outline of the girl's feet. It was the last record of what those feet would look like in their natural form before foot binding. Hi, I'm Amy. In a previous video, I talked about the history of the terrible beauty standard that was foot binding, which was practiced in China for over 1,000 years. Foot binding was a custom practiced in certain areas in China where young girls' feet were tightly wrapped in cloth to force them into a much smaller, distorted shape. In these areas, it was believed that a daughter needed bound feet to marry well, and a daughter with normal feet might not marry at all. In 1912, foot binding was officially banned, but it wasn't something that could just be changed overnight. In some parts of China, especially in rural communities, the old custom was still alive and would be practiced for many more years to come. After making my previous video about foot binding, I came across a story online on Zhihu. It was written by someone in China about their own great-grandmother, a woman born in the final year of the Qing dynasty, who was among the last generation of Chinese women to experience traditional foot binding. Her feet were bound when she was 5. She married into a wealthy family because of them, lost everything when her husband died, survived the war, fled to a remote island, and eventually had to decide whether the life she had been taught to live was worth passing on to her daughter. While many of the individual details cannot be independently verified, and some of the events may have been embellished, the account appears to be based on real events passed down through the family, with pseudonyms used to protect their family's identity. Today, I want to share this story, the life of one of the last women to have had her feet bound, a woman who we will refer to as Zhou Yumei. In 1916, in Laiyang, Shandong province, Zhou Yumei was 5 years old. Her mother had died when she was very young. Her dad remarried, and her stepmother was never really warm to her. She had 2 older brothers and a younger brother. And of everyone in the family, the person she was closest to was her aunt, her father's sister, a woman in her 20s who herself walked on bound feet. And today, her aunt is here again. But this time, the aunt wasn't there to visit. She was there to bind Zhou Yumei's feet. She brought a big bundle with her: cloth strips, small shoes, cotton, a loom powder, medicinal paste, a needle and thread, a knife, scissors. Zhou Yumei's father came into the room, looked at the supplies, nodded, told the aunt to bind well and make his daughter into a proper young lady, and walked out. Zhou Yumei knew this day was coming. Her father had told her since she was old enough to understand. Every woman goes through this. In Shandong at that time, the beauty standard for women was fair skin, dark hair, and small feet. The Zhou family was well off locally, which meant higher standards. No binding meant no marriage, and no marriage meant no future. So the aunt soaked her feet, dried them, rubbed a loom powder between the toes. Then came the red cloth. The aunt traced both of Zhou Yumei's feet onto it. This would be the last image of her feet as they had been before foot binding. And then the binding itself began. The aunt folded 4 of the toes underneath the sole and began wrapping. It was so painful that Zhou Yumei screamed. Her stepmother came in from outside the door and held her down. The aunt wrapped the cloth tightly and sewed it shut so it could not come loose overnight. And that was only the first day. The aunt and her husband moved into the Zhou household to oversee the whole process. They ended up staying for 2.5 years. That first night, they put red sleeping shoes on her. Her feet felt like they were on fire. She tugged at her aunt's sleeve, crying, begging her to loosen the wrappings. But her aunt refused. She told Zhou Yumei that she had to endure it, that when it came time to marry, a husband's family would look at a woman's feet before they looked at her face, that a woman's face was given by heaven, but her feet were shaped by effort, and that if her dead mother knew the aunt had gone soft, she would never forgive her. I can't fully understand that way of thinking, but that was how they justified it. Every few days, the aunt would take the bindings off, clean the wound, and wrap them again, tighter each time. And every day, despite the pain, Zhou Yumei was made to get up and walk, because the pressure of walking was what helped force the bones into their new shape. During all of this, Zhou Yumei ran fevers. She could barely eat. She lost so much weight that her family had to prepare special food just to keep her alive. Eggs fried in sesame oil sprinkled with sugar. Zhou Yumei missed her mother. She kept thinking that if her mother were still alive, surely she would not have let this happen. The months turned into years. Tighten, walk, wash, tighten again, and repeat. And after around 2 years, Zhou Yumei's feet were reshaped. Her feet had been reduced to roughly the length of a cigarette. She was 7 years old, and the pain would not stop. A woman with bound feet wrapped them every day for the rest of her life. As a part of the foot binding process, Zhou Yumei's aunt also taught her how to walk. Walking on bound feet was nothing like walking before. She had to learn a whole different way of walking called the lianbu, the lotus step. The steps had to be short, careful, and balanced, with hips swaying for balance. It was supposed to look graceful and elegant, but it was brutal and painful. The training went on for years. The aunt's goal was simple. Someday, a husband's family would be watching, and Zhou Yumei needed to know how to walk well enough to attract a respectable husband. And then there was the daily reality of living with foot binding. The binding cloth smelled. Sweat, old blood, herbal paste, and something sour that never seemed to go away. They had to be washed constantly, but they could never be hung outside. At least, that was what Zhou Yumei's aunt told her. Binding cloth were private. No man except her husband was supposed to see them, so they got hung indoors, on a line across the room or draped over a chair. Girls from poor families who did not have their own rooms just had to find some hidden corner. The aunt told Zhou Yumei that some men actually liked the smell. That is so strange to me, and obviously Zhou Yumei didn't understand it. But then again, there was a lot about bound feet she didn't understand. But those were the rules. Other than Zhou Yumei herself and her aunt, nobody ever saw her feet unwrapped. Not until her wedding night. Maybe the hiding of the feet was a part of what made them desirable. When Zhou Yumei was 16, her father died. Her older brother split up the family assets and took the biggest share. Then he took Zhou Yumei and her second brother with him to the coastal city of Yantai, where he started a seafood business. The stepmother got a small portion and took the youngest brother. He was 13. And not long after, the stepmother sold him to a distant relative in Dalian as a laborer. The siblings would not find each other again for over 50 years. So now Zhou Yumei was living in Yantai, and she had reached marrying age. Her older brother had his own family to worry about, so he started looking for a husband for her. That summer, he began insisting that she deliver his lunch to the market every day. He claimed that the food near the stall was no good, and that he needed his wife's homemade food. But it was all part of his plan to make sure that she was seen. Zhou Yumei was beautiful, and she walked with the trained lotus gait. In the crowded market, surrounded by men on their lunch break, she stood out. Her brother was confident that she would attract suitors. And he was right. Men stared, some cackled. Street loafers yelled at her to lift her trouser legs so they could see her feet. And among the men at the market was the patriarch of the Bi family, a wealthy sea cucumber merchant. He was especially fond of opera, storytelling, and women with very small feet. He spotted Zhou Yumei and decided that she was perfect. Not for himself, but for his unmarried second son. And this was exactly what Zhou Yumei's older brother was hoping for. If she married into the Bi family, he would be rid of a burden and gain a useful connection. So the two men set up an opportunity for the prospective husband, Bi Er, to see Zhou Yumei. One day, Zhou Yumei's brother sent her to burn incense at a local temple, and as she knelt on the prayer cushion, her red embroidered shoes slipped out into view. Bi was secretly watching from nearby, and he liked what he saw. One look, and within a month, the marriage was arranged. On the wedding night, after the veil came off, the first thing her new husband said was, "Take off your shoes." He unwrapped the bindings, held her feet, and called them Fo Tou Lian, Buddha head lotus, which was considered to be one of the more desirable feet shapes. And for a while, Zhou Yumei lived the life that all the pain was supposed to buy. She was a young mistress in a wealthy household. Servants did the work. She did not cook, did not clean, and was completely taken care of. The entire Bi family treated her well because the patriarch and his son both adored her. Looking back on it, she actually started to feel grateful toward the aunt she had once begged to stop. But Zhou Yumei's good life did not last. Within a few years, her husband Bi's health took a turn for the worse. He was a heavy opium smoker, which left him in poor health, and he eventually developed tuberculosis. Bi was dying, and the couple was forced to sleep in separate rooms to prevent contagion. But then Zhou Yumei was already pregnant, and in the bitter cold of winter, she gave birth to a girl. But the dying Bi was desperate for a son. When the baby turned out to be a girl, he took it badly. Despite the fact that Zhou Yumei had just given birth, he dragged her across the room by the hair and shoved her face against a burning stove. Her thick bangs partially shielded her forehead, but the burn left a permanent scar. Her daughter would be named Bi Yunfang, and Bi passed away shortly after. Suddenly, everything the Golden Lotus had brought for Zhou Yumei was gone. Without a son, her position in the household became very fragile. At first, her father-in-law protected her and his new granddaughter, but a few years later, he too passed away. And Bi's older brother and his wife wasted no time. They quickly arranged a second marriage for Zhou Yumei as a polite way of kicking her out. Her own older brother would not help her, and her second brother had disappeared years ago. So at 24, Zhou Yumei left the Bi household with her daughter and not much else. The Golden Lotus had gotten her into the wealthy Bi family. But now, those same feet meant she could not travel easily, could not support herself, and was forced to go where she was sent. Zhou Yumei's second husband was a man named Wang Chunyang. He was a schoolteacher from a poor family, but he had picked up modern ideas through his education. And unlike anyone Zhou Yumei had known before, he was genuinely kind to both her and her daughter. He raised Bi Yunfang like she was his own. By this time, anti-foot binding campaigns had been going on for years. The old custom was disappearing in many places, though it was far from gone. Not long after their marriage, Wang Chunyang encouraged Zhou Yumei to unbind her feet. The problem was, she had no idea how painful it would be. After years of being wrapped tight, her feet had gone soft and distorted. The moment the bindings came off, she was in pain. She tried to stand and fell. Her feet swelled up. Then came the fever. She quickly discovered that unbinding was not as simple as removing the cloth. The process took weeks, soaking, waiting, loosening the wrappings a little at a time. After more than a month, Zhou Yumei finally stopped wrapping entirely. Her feet got a little wider. The toes softened, but the bones stayed deformed. They were never going to go back to the way they were. And something else important happened for Zhou Yumei. For the first time in her life, she started making her own money. She sat at home and sewed lace with a shuttle. She got better and better at it. And eventually, foreign trading companies in Yantai started ordering from her directly. Wang Chunyang even talked about having another child together. Things were finally stable, and Zhou Yumei's future looked promising. But then, it all fell apart again. In 1938, the Japanese occupied Yantai. Almost overnight, life for Zhou Yumei changed. Her husband Wang Chunyang started acting differently. He was leaving earlier, coming home later. Nervous, evasive. Zhou Yumei asked what was going on, but he would not tell her. And then one day, he just did not come home. A few nights later, there was a knock at the door. Zhou Yumei rushed to open it, thinking it was her husband. But to her surprise, it was her second brother, the one who had been missing for years. He did not even say hello or ask how she was. There was no explanation of where he had been or what he had been doing. Instead, he told her to pack. He said they had to leave immediately. Her brother told her that Wang Chunyang had been working with the underground resistance and he had been arrested by the Japanese soldiers. If the soldiers connected Zhou Yumei to him, she and her daughter were next. She barely had time to think. Her brother was already pulling things together. Her daughter was crying. They did not even take the bedding, just a few bundles thrown onto a wooden handcart. The city was in chaos, and Zhou Yumei's feet, even after years of unwinding, could not carry her quickly. So she and her daughter rode in a cart while her brother pulled them through the streets. He got them out by road, then by boat, to a place called Kongtong Island, a small, remote island off the coast of Yantai. Not many people lived there, and the open sea surrounded it on all sides. It was the kind of place you go to disappear. Zhou Yumei and her daughter would need to live there for the next few years, under false names. She had to farm her own food and survive on her own now. But she grew up in a comfortable household and had never done hard physical work in her life. And her deformed feet could not support heavy labor. She tried to haul water and could not do it. She fell in the fields over and over. Her face aged. Her skin darkened. The money her brother had left eventually ran out. More than once, lying in the dirt, she thought about giving up entirely. But her daughter was growing up, getting old enough to help, and they made it through. Her brother came to visit them on the island 2 times. Both times, Zhou Yumei asked him what he did for a living and how he had known about the arrest. But both times, he would not say. On his second visit, he told her something that confirmed what she had already been afraid of. On the main road in Yantai, the Japanese soldiers had taken over a restaurant and turned it into a display. There were glass jars lined up inside, each one containing the severed head of a captured resistance fighter. Her brother had secretly gone to look, and one of them looked like Wang Chunyang. By 1945, Bi Yunfang was 15, and the war was ending. Zhou Yumei's brother showed up one last time. He told her the Japanese soldiers had been driven out of Yantai, but he was heading to Qingdao and could not stay. Zhou Yumei would not find out until much later that her brother had joined the Nationalist Party. He would eventually go to Taiwan, and they would not see each other again for many years. Before leaving, he brought Zhou Yumei and her daughter back to Yantai and set them up with a friend of his, a man named Li Yi. Li Yi worked as a clerk at a foreign trading company. His wife had died recently. He had no children, and he had a big house. Zhou Yumei was 34 now, and despite her hard years on the island, she was still beautiful. And Li Yi seemed modern and educated. He even paid for Bi Yunfang's schooling. After staying with him for a while, feelings developed and they got together. But it turned out that he had a thing for her small lotus feet. Li Yi asked Zhou Yumei to bind her feet again. He even went out and brought her 2 pairs of little shoes edged in gold and set with pearls. By this time, bound feet were mostly a thing of the past. Most women you saw on the streets had normal, unbound feet. But Zhou Yumei went and brought white cloth, cut it into strips, and started wrapping her feet all over again. She wanted to make Li Yi happy. It wasn't a big deal, she thought. She had already gone through this before. Every time she washed and rewrapped her feet, Li Yi helped her, and he seemed to enjoy the process. Then he turned his attention to Bi Yunfang. He started pushing Zhou Yumei to bind her daughter's feet too. Bi Yunfeng was furious when she found out. She stopped going to school and ran away from home. Zhou Yumei spent days looking for her and finally found her at a classmate's house. Bi Yunfeng told her mother that this was a new society. Nobody thought bound feet were beautiful anymore. Her teachers were strongly opposed to foot binding. They taught her that women needed to work, learn skills, and support themselves so they would not have to depend on others. And then she told her mother, "You need to stop too." Bi Yunfeng's words struck a chord in her mother. Zhou Yumei thought about her whole life. Her first husband wanted her for her feet and burned her face when she gave him a daughter instead of a son. Her second husband was kind, but once he was gone, she could barely take care of herself. And now here was Li Yi trying to push her daughter into the same life. Her survival had always depended on other people, and her bound feet had only made that dependence harder to escape. And now she had almost lost her daughter because of it. For the next 2 years, she and Bi Yunfeng worked non-stop. They worked on their tailoring. They sewed lace, often working through the nights. The strain wrecked Zhou Yumei's eyesight, and her eyes teared up constantly after that. But every coin they made, they saved. And one day, while Li Yi was at work, Zhou Yumei and her daughter quietly moved out. She finally had enough money to go, and they had the skills to keep themselves alive. After the founding of the People's Republic, Bi Yunfeng got a job at a seaweed processing factory. Zhou Yumei joined a neighborhood anti-foot binding campaign, talking to women who had not yet unbound their feet. She had lived through foot binding herself, and she did not want other women to go through the same thing. Decades passed. Her oldest brother passed away, and Zhou Yumei did not know if she would ever see her remaining brothers again. Determined to find what remained of her family, Zhou Yumei started looking for her youngest brother, the one their stepmother had sold when he was 13. Nobody had heard from him in over 50 years, and she finally found him. And then, in the late 1980s, Zhou Yumei's second brother was finally able to visit from Taiwan, and the 3 surviving siblings met at the airport. Zhou Yumei was 78 years old, and they just held each other and cried. Her second brother even brought gifts, and then he took Zhou Yumei to a department store to buy several pairs of fancy lotus shoes. But this was not because he supported foot binding. Zhou Yumei's feet were permanently deformed, and she could never wear normal shoes. Even with her feet unbound, she still needed lotus shoes just to walk. Her brother buying them is an act of care, but it's also a reminder that the damage never went away. And her brother kept saying the same thing, that he had been too afraid of their father to speak up, that he should have stopped the foot binding when she was 5 years old. In her final years, Zhou Yumei still soaked and washed her feet every day. Her legs were thin and weak. She could not walk without a cane. Her back was badly hunched from a lifetime of trying to balance on feet that could not properly support her. A modern shopping mall had been built right in front of her home, but she never once went inside. She told her great-grandchild, "The floor in there looked so shiny and slippery, I'm afraid I would fall." More than 70 years after her feet were first bound, she was still living with the consequences. Zhou Yumei died in 1992. She was 81. That's it for this video. If you enjoyed today's topic, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Stay curious, stay magical.